My manifest said they were all dead. 120 Apex Holdings employees listed as deceased, asset loss, in neat columns on my datapad. Each entry timestamped 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago. Standard notation for a total colony failure. I'd reviewed it 3 times during the descent to LV-734's surface, practicing my delivery confirmation speech to an empty landing pad, because even dead sites require proper documentation. The Stork touched down exactly where it was supposed to. Landing platform 7, 300 meters from the main colony hub. I was already running through delivery protocol 77 Alpha in my head, the one for posthumous asset retrieval sites. Sign the manifest myself as both deliverer and receiver. Photograph the cargo placement. File the completion report. Back in space within an hour. My first solo deep space run, and even if it was to a graveyard, I'd execute it flawlessly. My supervisor, Hernandez, had made it clear this was my proving ground. Even the milk runs matter, Gallo, she'd said, especially the classified ones. The cargo hold's atmospheric seal broke with the hiss that meant I was now on site, officially beginning my delivery window. 5 metric tons of Series 8 nutritional supplements, though why a dead colony needed military-grade biostasis containers for food supplies was above my clearance level. Probably some contractual obligation Apex couldn't wriggle out of. The legal department was always particular about fulfilling delivery schedules, even to sites that had been written off. I stepped onto the platform, and that's when my carefully rehearsed protocol collapsed. 3 people stood 20 meters away, and they were very much not dead. They wore mining coveralls that had seen better days, the Apex logo barely visible under layers of patched repairs, and they were pointing industrial rivet guns at me. Not security weapons, but the heavy-duty RC-90 models we used for piercing ore deposits. I'd signed the purchase orders for 1,000 of them last quarter. In the hands of the woman in front, it looked perfectly capable of punching a rivet through my sternum. "Hands where we can see them," she said. Her voice carried the kind of exhaustion that comes from saying the same thing too many times. Slowly, I raised my hands, my mind scrambling to reconcile this with my manifest. "I'm Peter Gallo, Apex Logistics Division. I'm here on a scheduled delivery. My documentation, we know who you are." This from the man to her left, younger, with electrical burns scarring his neck. "We've been tracking your approach for 6 hours. The woman stepped forward, and I could see her face more clearly now. She had the look of someone running on stimulants and stubbornness, nothing else. Her name tag read Curtis, but it was crossed out, Day Watch, scrawled underneath in permanent marker. "The cargo," she said. "What did you bring?" "Nutritional supplements, 5 tons, Series 7, high preservation grade." I tried to keep my voice professional. This was just a misunderstanding. "I have the full manifest on my datapad if you'd like to." She actually laughed. "Nutritional supplements, in biostasis containers." Yes, that's what my shipping documentation indicates." The 3 of them exchanged looks I couldn't read. The woman, Curtis, lowered her rivet gun slightly. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" My hands were starting to ache from holding them up. "Listen, according to my records, this colony suffered a complete environmental failure 5 years ago. Total asset loss. You're all supposed to be dead." "Yeah, we get that a lot." The third figure, an older man with a miner's build, moved toward my ship. "Keys to the cargo hold, now." I fumbled for the access fob on my belt. "This is highly irregular. I need to verify your authority to—" "Garcia, Rivera, get those containers secured and into the hub. Full hazmat protocol." Curtis cut me off, then looked back at me. "You're coming with us. I have delivery procedures to follow. I need to—" A new voice interrupted, calm and carrying authority. "Miss Curtis, that's enough. I'll handle our guest." A man emerged from behind my landing struts, and even after 5 years in what my manifest called a dead zone, He still looked like management. His coveralls were cleaner. His company-issued boots still held some shine, and he had the particular way of standing that said, "I write your performance reviews." His colony manager insignia was still pinned to his chest, right where regulation demanded. "Mr. Gallo," he said, extending his hand like this was a normal meet and greet. "Bob Hayes, I apologize for the dramatic reception, but we've had to implement some non-standard security protocols." I shook his hand automatically, my corporate training taking over. "Mr. Hayes, I'm confused. My briefing indicated—" "I'm sure it did." He glanced at the sun, which was already starting its descent toward the horizon. "We need to get you inside the hub before dark. I'll explain everything, but right now time is a factor." "I don't understand. Is there some kind of environmental hazard?" Hayes's expression tightened. "You could say that." He turned to Curtis. "How long?" She checked a chronometer strapped to her wrist where a normal watch should be. 3 hours, 47 minutes until full dark. "Plenty of time." Hayes gestured toward the main colony structure. "Mr. Gallo, please come with me. Your cargo will be secured, I promise you that." "My ship will be fine. We've maintained the landing pad's perimeter integrity." He started walking, clearly expecting me to follow. "But you need to be inside the hub before nightfall. That's non-negotiable. Every regulation I knew said not to leave my ship unsecured at an active site, but Hayes was a colony manager, grade 7 or higher by his insignia, which put him 4 full steps above me in the corporate hierarchy. When management that senior gives you a direct instruction, you follow it. "Can you at least tell me what's going on?" I asked, falling into step beside him. "Why does my manifest list you all as deceased?" Hayes kept walking, his pace steady but urgent. Behind us I could hear Curtis directing the others as they opened my cargo hold. "Because, Mr. Gallo, as far as Apex Holdings is concerned, we are dead. We've been dead for 5 years. He glanced at me, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't identify. "The problem is, on LV-734, that's not as permanent as you'd think." The colony hub emerged ahead, and I could see now what I'd missed from the landing pad. Every window was reinforced with welded bars. The main entrance had been retrofitted with what looked like vault doors. Electrified fencing ran along the perimeter, and I counted at least 6 automated turrets on the roof, all pointed outward. This wasn't a mining colony anymore. It was a fortress. "Mr. Hayes, what exactly happened here?" He stopped at the outer checkpoint, where 2 more colonists stood guard with military-grade pulse rifles we definitely hadn't approved purchase orders for. The official story: catastrophic failure of an experimental atmospheric processor, total loss of life, permanent quarantine to prevent contamination spread. And the real story? Hayes punched in an access code, and the massive door began to cycle open. "The real story, Mr. Gallo, is that everyone in this colony has died at least once. Most of us have died dozens of times." He stepped through the entrance, and I had no choice but to follow. "Welcome to LV-734. You're going to want to pay very close attention to the safety briefing, because in about 3 hours you're going to see your first resurrection. And if we're very unlucky, you'll see what happens when it goes wrong." The door sealed behind me. I'd completed deliveries to 17 different sites in my 2 years with Apex. I'd memorized every regulation, every protocol, every form. None of them had prepared me for a colony manager telling me his people die and come back to life. The inside of the hub looked like someone had tried to build a shopping mall inside a bunker. Fluorescent panels cast everything in the flat, even light that Apex used in all its facilities. Corporate studies showed it improved productivity by 12%, but the lighting only made the modifications more jarring. Steel plates welded over what used to be observation windows, improvised barricades built from ore containers, emergency supply caches stacked in corners with inventory tags I recognized from disaster protocol forms I'd filed 100 times. 28 people occupied the common area, and they all stopped what they were doing to stare at me. Not the 30 survivors my rough count suggested. Some must have been elsewhere. They had the particular kind of thinness that comes from rationed meals, and every single one wore a chronometer where their company-issued fitness tracker should have been. Curtis had already rejoined them, directing 4 people to sort through my cargo containers. Hayes led me past them toward what the facility map designated as Conference Room A. "We'll do this in stages," he said. "No point overwhelming you before you need to be overwhelmed. Mr. Hayes, I need to report this situation immediately. A living colony marked as total asset loss. That's a Category 1 documentation error. Legal will need to... sit." He pointed to a chair at the conference table, the same model I'd sat in for quarterly reviews. "Legal knows exactly what's happening here, Mr. Gallo. So does upper management. So does the board. I sat because that's what you do when a Grade 7 manager tells you to. That's impossible. The liability alone..." "Watch." He pulled up something on his datapad and slid it across to me. "This is from 17 days ago." Security footage filled the screen. The timestamp read 15:47, and it showed the main entrance I'd just walked through. A woman I recognized from the common area, her name tag had read Cooper, was standing guard. She looked bored, checking her chronometer every few seconds. At 15:52, she started backing away from the door. At 15:53, she was running. At 15:54, something hit the electrified barrier. It had been human once. That was the worst part. It wore the shredded remains of mining coveralls, and I could still see an employee ID badge flapping against its chest. But the way it moved, it didn't run. It scuttled, using its arms as much as its legs, joints bending in ways that should have snapped tendons. Its mouth was open too wide, like someone had cut the corners to make more room for the teeth. "Nightborn," Hayes said. "That's what we call them." More of them hit the barrier. The electricity arced, and they screamed, not in pain but in frustration. They clawed at the fence, their fingers burning, skin charring, and they kept clawing. Behind them, more shapes emerged from the darkness. Dozens. "They can't handle UV radiation," Hayes continued. "That's why they only come out after sunset. They live in the mining tunnels during the day." On the screen, Cooper had grabbed a pulse rifle. She was firing through the fence, and I watched one of the Nightborn's heads explode. It dropped, twitched twice, and went still. "But here's the thing, Mr. Gallo." Hayes reached over and fast-forwarded the footage. The timestamp jumped to 6:03 the next morning. Keep watching. The sunrise on LV 734 was different from Earth standard. The star was closer, more intense. The first rays hit the colony at a sharp angle, and the security camera adjusted for the brightness. The dead Nightborn from the previous evening was still there, head half gone, sprawled in the dirt. Then it moved. The body convulsed. The destroyed skull began to reform, bone and tissue growing back like time-lapse footage of fruit rotting in reverse. Within 4 minutes, the Nightborn sat up. Its eyes were different now, human eyes, confused and frightened. It looked at its hands, at the fence, and then it started crying. Someone inside opened a small access gate, and 2 colonists in improvised hazmat suits rushed out to grab him. "That was Hendricks," Hayes said. "Good drill operator. He's died 8 times now. Comes back as himself maybe half the time." "That's..." I couldn't finish the sentence. There wasn't a form for this. No protocol that covered the dead returning to life. Impossible. "Yeah, we thought so too." Hayes took his datapad back. "First time it happened, we thought we were hallucinating. Carbon monoxide leak, maybe." But it kept happening. Every death, every single one, reverses at sunrise. The UV radiation from our star triggers something. Cellular regeneration at an exponential rate. Complete neural reconstruction. Except sometimes they come back altered. 30% of the time, give or take. The body rebuilds, but the mind, he shrugged. Whatever makes someone human doesn't always survive the process. They wake up as Nightborn, feral, hostile, and they hunt us, Hayes stood. Come on, it's almost time. He led me back to the common area. The colonists had transformed the space into something between a military checkpoint and an emergency room. Weapons were being distributed, medical supplies laid out. Curtis checked her chronometer. Sunset in T-7 minutes. Standard positions, everyone, Hayes called out. Mr. Gallo, you'll want to stay back from the windows. And whatever you see, whatever happens, do not try to help. We've got procedures for this. I should have been taking notes, filing an incident report in my head. But I couldn't stop thinking about the video, about watching someone's skull reform from nothing. The Human Resources Manual had extensive sections on workplace injuries, even fatalities. It didn't have a section on what to do when your workforce literally couldn't die. Perimeter check, someone called out. All segments hot. Turrets armed. Medical standing by, another voice added. Hayes stood in the center of the room like a ship's captain. Remember, people, we've done this before. We'll do it again. Nobody plays hero. Nobody takes unnecessary risks. We hold the line. We survive the night, and we deal with the consequences at dawn. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, and the automatic lights kicked on around the perimeter. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then I heard a sound like dozens of fingernails dragging across steel. They came from the mine elevator first. The throat, someone had called it. The cargo lift that normally brought ore to the surface now delivered something else. They poured out of it, moving in that horrible scuttle I'd seen on the video. In the floodlights, I could see them clearly. Men and women in the tatters of Apex uniforms, their company ID badges still clipped to whatever remained of their clothing. Their faces were human in shape only. The expressions were pure hunger. Contact at the North Barrier, Curtis reported, counting 30 plus. The Nightborn hit the electrified fence, and the air filled with the crack of electricity and that frustrated screaming. They pressed against it, bodies piling up, smoking, burning, not caring. Behind the first wave, more emerged. 50, 70, 100. Where are they all coming from? I asked. Mining level 3 has the biggest concentration, Hayes answered. We've counted at least 200 down there. Could be more. We sealed the lower levels years ago. The turrets opened fire, automated systems tracking movement and dispensing concentrated pulse rounds. Nightborn fell, heads exploding, chests caving in. They kept coming. One made it over the fence, using the piled bodies of its fellows as a ladder. A colonist with a rivet gun put 3 industrial spikes through its chest before it hit the ground. Breach at southwest corner, someone said. I turned to see 3 Nightborn inside the perimeter. They'd found some gap, some weakness. 2 colonists engaged them with mining tools, industrial cutters that carved through flesh and bone. 1 colonist went down, a Nightborn's teeth in his throat. Blood sprayed across the concrete, arterial and bright. Cox is down, Curtis called out. Medical now. But there was no point. I could see from here that Cox's throat was gone, his neck open to the spine. He twitched twice and went still. The Nightborn that killed him turned toward us, Cox's blood running down its chin, and a woman beside me put a pulse rifle round through its skull. The assault continued for 3 hours. Wave after wave, the Nightborn threw themselves at our defenses. 7 more colonists died. Edwards pushed off the roof while trying to repair a turret. Jackson and Williams caught outside the medical bay when a group broke through. 4 others I didn't know yet. Their bodies dragged to a designated area near the east wall, covered with standard Apex emergency blankets. By midnight, the attacks had slowed. The Nightborn retreated to the shadows beyond the lights. Occasionally one would test the fence, but the mass assault was over. Normal pattern, Hayes said, noticing my expression. They probe for weakness until about 3 a.m., then withdraw before dawn. They don't like being caught in sunlight. I spent the rest of the night watching colonists clean weapons, repair barriers, and tend to injuries. Nobody cried for the dead. Nobody seemed surprised. Curtis actually ate a protein bar while standing watch, checking her chronometer between bites. At 5:47, as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, Hayes led me to the east wall where the bodies were laid out. "You'll want to watch this," he said. "Really understand what we're dealing with." The sunrise hit the bodies at 6:01. I watched Edwards's crushed skull reinflate like a balloon. Watched Jackson's torn throat seal itself, the ragged flesh knitting together in seconds. Watched Williams's snapped spine straighten with a series of clicks that sounded like bubble wrap. Within 5 minutes, all 7 were breathing. Within 6, they were sitting up. Edwards looked around, confused. "Did I?" "Roof fall," Curtis told him. "You're back." Jackson and Williams helped each other stand, checking their necks where the wounds had been. 2 others seemed dazed but human, responding to their names, accepting water bottles. But the other 2, they came up altered. I knew it immediately. The way their eyes moved, tracking everything at once. The way their fingers curled and uncurled, testing their grip. One of them, Jefferson, according to the tag still on his coveralls, looked directly at me. There was nothing human in that gaze, just assessment. Like I was meat it was measuring. "Nightborn," Hayes said quietly. "Curtis, containment team." 4 colonists in improvised armor approached with restraint poles, the kind used for dangerous equipment maintenance. Jefferson snarled, lunged, and they caught him around the neck. The other one tried to run, moving in that horrible scuttle, but they got her too. "Holding cells," Hayes ordered. "Standard procedure." As they dragged the 2 new Nightborn away, Jefferson made eye contact with me again. He smiled, showing too many teeth, and I understood with perfect clarity that he wanted to tear me open and see what was inside. "We keep them for a few days," Hayes explained. "Sometimes they come back, 2nd resurrection, 3rd. Eventually most stay Nightborn permanently. When that happens..." He didn't finish, but I understood. When that happened, they got a pulse rifle round and joined the creatures in the tunnels. Edwards walked past us, rubbing his newly reformed skull. "Morning, boss. New guy survive his first night?" "He did," Hayes confirmed. Edwards looked at me with something between pity and resignation. "Welcome to LV 734, where death is just an inconvenience and morning shift starts with resurrection. You'll get used to it." But standing there, watching people treat death and rebirth like a standard workplace hazard, I knew he was wrong. This wasn't something you got used to. This was something that slowly drove you insane, one sunrise at a time. My manifest had been right. Everyone on LV 734 was dead. They just didn't stay that way. 3 days into my stay on LV 734, I couldn't reconcile the numbers. I'd spent those days doing what I did best, cataloguing, filing, creating order from chaos in my head. The colony operated on strict schedules, morning resurrections at 6 o'clock, perimeter repairs from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, food distribution at 11 o'clock and 17 o'clock, evening lockdown at 18:30. It ran like an Apex facility should run, if you ignored the part where people died every night and came back every morning. My manifest listed 120 employees. The survivors numbered 28, sometimes 29 depending on who came back right that morning. The Nightborn population, according to Curtis's patrol estimates, was at least 200. The math didn't work. Where were the extra bodies coming from? I tried asking Hayes, but he'd given me the kind of non-answer middle management excels at. "Population dynamics in a closed system can be complex," he'd said, which was corporate speak for stop asking questions. So I stopped asking and started looking. The administration block caught my attention on day 2. It sat on mining level 1, accessible through a maintenance shaft that bypassed the main elevator, the throat that delivered Nightborn every evening. What interested me wasn't the location, but the power consumption. According to the resource allocation display in the command center, the administration block was drawing 12% of the colony's total power output. That was excessive for an abandoned office space. The only systems that should need that much power were life support, the perimeter defenses, and the medical bay. I made my move during the afternoon shift change, when most colonists were either sleeping off night watch or preparing for the evening siege. The maintenance shaft was exactly where the facility blueprint on my datapad said it would be, behind a panel marked Authorized Personnel Only. My Apex ID badge, the same one that had felt like a Medal of Honor 2 weeks ago, opened it on the first try. The shaft was a vertical drop with a service ladder, the kind OSHA, Operational Safety and Health Administration, Apex's workplace safety division, would have required inspection tags for. The tags were there, actually dated 5 years and 4 months ago. Someone had maintained safety protocols right up until the quarantine. Mining Level 1 was different from the hub. No modifications here, no welded barriers or improvised weapons. Just empty corridors lit by emergency strips. The administration block's entrance was 50 meters from the shaft, and I knew I'd found something when I saw the door. It had been sealed with industrial welding, the kind we used for permanent closures. But someone had been back since. There was a human-sized hole cut in the lower corner, edges still sharp from plasma cutting. Fresh scratches in the dust showed recent passage. I crawled through, my jacket catching on the metal edge, and found myself in what had been the colony's executive suite. Corner offices with actual windows, though they just showed more corridor. A break room with a coffee machine that probably cost more than I made in a month. And at the end of the hall, light spilling from under a door marked Geological Analysis Lab. Inside, a woman sat hunched over a microscope that belonged in a biomedical facility, not a mining colony. She had the kind of focused intensity that meant she wouldn't notice if the building caught fire, which is probably why she didn't hear me enter. "Dr. Reed?" I said, reading the nameplate on the desk. She spun around, knocking over a specimen container that rolled but didn't break. Military-grade plastic, not standard lab equipment. "Who the hell? Gallo? The logistics officer?" "That's right. Hayes know you're here? Does Hayes know you're here?" She laughed, but it had an edge to it. "Fair point. He pretends this lab doesn't exist, and I pretend to follow his resource allocation guidelines. Everybody's happy." She turned back to her work. "You should leave. This section isn't safe." "Because of the Nightborn? Because of what made them?" She gestured to the microscope. "Want to see what's been eating us from the inside for 5 years?" I looked through the scope. The sample looked like prismatic structures mixed with organic tissue. Beautiful in the way a virus looks beautiful when you don't know it's deadly. "LV 734R, she said. "The Lazarus agent. That's what they called it in the original documentation." She pulled up files on her terminal, not a standard colony computer, but a sealed research unit with independent power. Took me 3 years to crack the encryption, another year to understand what I was reading. The files were labeled Project Lazarus, Phase 3 Implementation. The Apex logo sat in the corner of every page, along with classification stamps I'd only seen on executive-level documents. Dr. Reed opened a video file. 3 people in lab coats stood in this very room, dated 6 years ago. I recognized the woman in the center. Dr. Alice Fleming, Apex's Director of Strategic Bioweapons Development. I'd seen her once at a company event giving a presentation on defensive biological research. Phase 2 trials showed a 97% resurrection rate, Fleming was saying in the video. Phase 3 will test the agent's stability in a closed population over extended periods. The mining colony provides ideal isolation, and the workers' contracts include standard medical research waivers. "What about informed consent?" asked one of her colleagues. Fleming's expression didn't change. "The board has determined that full disclosure would compromise test validity. The agent will be introduced through the atmospheric processing system under the cover of a routine efficiency upgrade. Subjects will attribute any initial symptoms to environmental factors. And the conversion rate? Acceptable losses. The military applications of a soldier who can't permanently die outweigh a 30% battlefield casualty rate. Soldiers who convert can still serve as area denial assets." She meant Nightborn. She meant turning dead soldiers into weapons. The video continued for another 20 minutes, discussing deployment methods, monitoring protocols, and something called asset degradation tracking, measuring how many times someone could die and resurrect before permanently converting. They did this on purpose, I said. Oh, it gets better. Reed pulled up another file. They've been watching us the whole time. Satellite surveillance, automated data collection through our own systems. We're not a failed colony, Gallo. We're a successful experiment. She showed me logs, transmission records with Apex receiving addresses, regular uploads of biometric data, death counts, conversion rates. 5 years of suffering, documented and filed in neat quarterly reports. Hayes has to know, I said. Hayes definitely knows. Look at this. She pulled up internal colony communications from just before the quarantine. See the pattern? Key personnel transfers, critical supplies mysteriously back-ordered, and then she highlighted a message. Colony Director Williams reassigned for health reasons 72 hours before the outbreak, replaced by Hayes, who just happened to have a background in crisis management. A wave of nausea rose through me. He's been managing us, keeping the experiment running. Managing the asset degradation rate, Reed corrected. That's what we are to them. Assets undergoing controlled degradation. Why haven't you told the others? With what proof? Hayes controls all communications. The moment I tried to organize resistance, he'd know. I'd have an accident come back as Nightborn. She turned back to her microscope. So I keep my head down and work on the only thing that might matter. She opened a sealed container, revealing a different sample. Under the scope, it looked similar to the Lazarus agent, but simpler, more primitive. The original microbe, she said, before they weaponized it. Found it in core samples from the deep shaft, the one they sealed. This little bastard survived in conditions that would kill anything else. Pressure, heat, radiation. It has regenerative properties, but it's stable, benign. It's what they built the weapon from. Could it cure? No, there's no cure. Once the agent's integrated into your DNA, it's permanent. But this... She held up the container. This is evidence. Proof that they took something that could have revolutionized medicine and turned it into a weapon. With the right equipment, I could demonstrate the genetic markers, show the modification signatures. Any legitimate scientist would recognize this as engineered biological warfare. We need to transmit this off-world. With what? Hayes made sure the communications array suffered that meteoroid impact right after the quarantine started. How about your ship's comms? Line of sight only. I'd need to be in orbit to reach a relay satellite. Reed stared at the sample. Then we're stuck playing Hayes's game until... An alarm cut through the lab. 3 sharp bursts, then repeat. Containment breach, Reed said, her face going pale. Sub-level 3. I thought that was sealed. It was. She was already packing the original microbe sample into a portable containment unit. Someone just unsealed it. We could hear it now, coming through the vents. Voices, human voices, distorted by distance and metal, chanting something. We need to go, Reed said. As we crawled back through the cut door, I saw something that made me stop. Scratched into the metal beside the opening were tally marks. Hundreds of them, grouped in sets of 30. At the bottom, someone had carved, "How many times can you die before you forget how to be human?" Reed pushed me forward. Move. Whatever's happening down there, we don't want to be here when it arrives. We made it to the maintenance shaft just as the lights wavered, struggling to hold steady. Something was drawing massive power from the grid. The elevator, Reed whispered. Someone's bringing up the deep elevator, the one that went to the collapsed levels. It had been disabled 5 years ago. We climbed faster than safety protocols would have allowed, Reed's containment unit banging against the ladder rungs. Behind us I could hear machinery groaning to life, old motors screaming as they engaged. We emerged in the hub to find chaos. Colonists running, Curtis shouting orders, Hayes standing in the command center looking at his datapad with an expression I'd never seen on a manager's face before. Fear. "What did you do?" he demanded when he saw me. "Nothing, we were just—" "Administration block. You were in the administration block." He grabbed my collar, his professional composure cracking. "Do you have any idea what you might have triggered? The automated systems down there, if they detected unauthorized access." The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. The deep elevator was rising. The one that connected to levels where 200 people had been trapped when the shaft collapsed, where the original microbe had been discovered, where Apex's scientists had first tested their weapon. "Everybody armed," Hayes commanded, his manager voice returning. "Full defensive positions. Nobody goes outside the hub." "Boss," Curtis said, checking her chronometer. "Sun sets in 40 minutes. Hayes looked at the elevator display on his terminal. The deep lift was at level 8 and rising. In 40 minutes, we'd have Nightborn attacking from the surface, and whatever was coming up from the deep would be here in 10. I was watching Reed, who had connected her datapad to the command terminal while Hayes was distracted. Her eyes widened at whatever she was seeing. "Peter," she said quietly. "The biosignatures from the deep elevator. They're not reading as human, but they're not reading as Nightborn either. What are they?" She looked up at me. "According to this, they're both." The deep elevator reached the surface 23 minutes before sunset. We all heard the mechanical groan as the lift doors opened, those massive industrial panels that hadn't moved in 5 years, grinding against rust. Then silence, not even breathing. The entire hub held still, 30 people with weapons pointed at the main corridor that connected to the deep shaft access. Hayes had his manager's override panel open, frantically entering codes. "The containment protocol should have held. The automated lockdown should have doesn't matter now," Curtis cut him off, adjusting her grip on a pulse rifle. "Edwards, Rivera, flanking positions. Everyone else maintain sight lines." I stood behind an overturned supply crate, holding a rivet gun I barely knew how to use. Reed crouched beside me, still clutching her containment unit with the original microbe sample. Through the transparent aluminum, I could see the primitive organism that had started all of this, suspended in preservation fluid. The first figure emerged from the corridor walking upright, human normal, wearing the remnants of a mining supervisor's uniform. The badge was still legible. Keith Thompson, shift leader, deep operations. Thompson had been listed among the casualties when the deep levels were sealed, a cave-in, according to my manifest. But Thompson's eyes were uncanny. Not the feral hunger of the Nightborn, and not the confused fear of the newly resurrected. They were perfectly clear, perfectly aware, and completely empty of anything I recognized as human emotion. "Keith." Hayes stepped forward, lowering his sidearm. "Keith Thompson. You were dead. The shaft collapse. We were—" Thompson's voice was flat, like someone reading a grocery list. "We died. We came back. We died again. We came back different." More bodies emerged behind Thompson, 20, 30, more, all walking normally, all wearing their old uniforms, all with those empty eyes. They filled the corridor, standing in perfect formation like they were waiting for a shift briefing. "Different how?" Hayes asked, and I could hear the tremor he was trying to hide. "How did you even survive down there? The deep levels were sealed, no food, no water access." Thompson tilted his head, a mechanical movement. "The emergency cache. Every deep mining level has 6 months of rations by regulation, remember? You signed the requisition forms yourself, Hayes, and the underground aquifer at level 12 remained accessible. But more importantly, we learned we don't need much food anymore. The Lazarus agent changes your metabolism after enough iterations. We eat maybe once a week now." "That's impossible. The process iterates," Thompson continued. "Death, resurrection, conversion. But if you continue past conversion, past the Nightborn phase, something else emerges. We've had 5 years to iterate, hundreds of deaths each. You're saying you died as Nightborn and came back as this? As improved?" Thompson's mouth moved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We retain the Nightborn's physical enhancements, strength, speed, resilience. But we've recovered cognitive function. More than recovered. We've optimized. One of the figures behind Thompson stepped forward. A woman whose badge read J. Vasquez, Senior Geologist. We've been organizing, learning. The Nightborn are driven by instinct. We're driven by purpose. What purpose? Curtis demanded, keeping her rifle trained on them. Survival through iteration, evolution through death. What Apex created by accident, we've perfected through experience. Thompson's empty eyes swept across us. You still fear death. We've moved beyond it. The sun was setting. Through the reinforced windows, I could see the last orange light fading. Soon the surface Nightborn would attack. We'd be caught between the mindless hungry ones outside and these... whatever these things were. We're not here to fight, Thompson continued. We're here to make an offer. Join us. Die. Come back. Iterate until you transcend the weakness of fearing mortality. You're insane, someone whispered. No, Vasquez corrected. We're evolved. The Lazarus agent isn't a curse, it's a gift. A path to something beyond human limitation. Outside, the first Nightborn screams echoed across the compound. The evening siege was beginning. Curtis barked orders, colonists running to defensive positions. Wait, Thompson said, raising his hand. The evolved behind him stood perfectly still. We're not leaving. Not until you understand. Hayes stepped forward, still gripping his sidearm. The perimeter is under attack. If you're not here to help, we are here to help. Thompson's empty eyes tracked the movement of colonists rushing to their positions. Watch. He walked to the main entrance, to the reinforced door that separated us from the killing ground outside. Before anyone could stop him, he opened it. No! Curtis swung her rifle toward him, but Thompson was already stepping outside. The Nightborns swarmed him immediately. 3 of them hit him at once, teeth and claws tearing into his flesh. Blood sprayed across the concrete. Thompson didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He grabbed one Nightborn by the throat and, with a motion too quick to follow, twisted its head completely around. The crack echoed across the compound. The other 2 Nightborn tore chunks from Thompson's torso, organs spilling onto the ground. He killed them both with his bare hands, even as his body failed, even as he collapsed into his own pooling blood. Then he stood up. Not at dawn, not with the UV radiation catalyst. Right there, in the darkness, Thompson's body rebuilt itself in seconds. The torn flesh sealed, the spilled organs reformed. He walked back through the door, covered in blood, but completely whole. 47 deaths in the deep levels, he said calmly. After the 40th, something changes. The Lazarus agent evolves. We don't need the sun anymore. The colonists had stopped moving. Even the sound of Nightborn at the perimeter seemed distant compared to what we just witnessed. That's impossible, Reed whispered beside me. The UV catalyst is essential to the neural reconstruction. Without it, the agent adapts, Vasquez said. Each death teaches it more about rebuilding its host. Eventually, it doesn't need external triggers. She looked at the frightened faces around her. We're offering you true immortality. No more cowering until dawn. No more fear. Hayes's datapad chimed. He glanced at it, his face tightening. Apex emergency transmission. Put it on speaker, Thompson said. Hayes activated the audio. A woman's voice filled the room, professional and cold. Colony LV 734. This is Director Fleming, Strategic Bioweapons Division. We're aware of the containment breach in your deep levels. Lockdown Protocol 7 is now in effect. All personnel are ordered to remain in position. Extraction team arriving in 10 hours for full evacuation. Extraction? Edwards said. They're finally pulling us out? But Thompson was smiling that mechanical smile again. Ask her about the cargo, Hayes. Ask about what Gallo actually delivered. Hayes's hand trembled as he activated the transmitter. Director Fleming, this is Colony Manager Hayes. Can you clarify the nature of Officer Gallo's cargo delivery? A pause. Then, The nutritional supplements contain a concentrated metabolic enhancer. It should help your people maintain strength during the evacuation process. She's lying, Thompson said flatly. We can smell it, Hayes. The chemical signature. Open one of those containers and see what Gallo really brought you. Curtis had two of her people drag one of my delivery containers into the center of the room. Hayes entered his code, and the biostasis seal broke. Inside, packed in military-grade foam, were auto-injectors, hundreds of them, each labeled LS7 metabolic supplement. Reed grabbed one, scanning it with her portable analyzer. Her face went white. It's a toxin, specifically engineered to target cells infected with the Lazarus agent. She looked up at me. This would kill everyone here in minutes, permanently, no resurrection. I felt the room's attention shift to me. 24 pairs of eyes filled with anger and fear. I didn't know, I said. The manifest said nutritional. Of course you didn't know, Hayes said. You're as expendable as the rest of us. They sent you here to deliver our execution, then die with us when the extraction team arrives to clean up. Extraction team, Thompson said. Interesting choice of words. Hayes, why don't you tell them what you've known all along? Hayes's hand moved to his sidearm, but 3 of the evolved were suddenly beside him, faster than anyone could track. One gently removed the weapon from his grip. Tell them, Thompson repeated. There is no extraction, Hayes said quietly. There never was. The extraction team is a kill squad, complete sterilization of the site. He looked at me. Your ship is the only way off this rock, and Apex knows it. They're counting on it being destroyed with everything else. My ship can hold 12 people, I said. Maybe 15 if we remove cargo. 28 survivors, Curtis said. Plus you. Plus them. She gestured at Thompson's group. We don't need your ship, Thompson said. We can't leave anyway. Take us off-world, and we die permanently within days. We're tied to this place now. His empty eyes swept across the survivors. But you don't have to be. Join us. Evolve. Stay here and live forever. As monsters, someone spat. As survivors, Vasquez corrected. Apex created us to be weapons. We've chosen to be something more. The Nightborn outside had reached the fence. Electricity crackled and the siege began in earnest. But inside, nobody moved. We were frozen in a moment of choice. 10 hours, Hayes said. We have 10 hours to decide who lives, who dies, and who transforms. Wrong, Thompson said. You have 1 hour. In 1 hour, we're opening all the doors. Every barricade, every defense. We'll let the Nightborn in. His voice never changed tone, like discussing weather. Anyone who hasn't chosen to evolve by then gets to discover what their final death looks like. Or you can try to reach Gallo's ship through 300 Nightborn. Your choice. You son of a... Curtis raised her rifle. Thompson moved so fast I barely saw it. The rifle was in pieces on the floor, and Curtis was holding her wrist, clearly broken. 1 hour, he repeated. Decide. The evolved spread through the hub, not attacking, just watching. Positioning themselves at every exit, every defensive point. We couldn't fight them. They were too fast, too strong, and they couldn't die. Hayes pulled me aside. Your ship, pre-flight sequence. 30 minutes, minimum. Start it remotely. Now. I activated my datapad, entering the startup codes. 300 meters away, the Stork began its wake-up cycle. Around us, the survivors were fracturing. Some grouped around Curtis, preparing weapons. Others stood apart, looking at the evolved, with something that wasn't quite fear anymore. Edwards was one of them. 47 deaths, he said quietly. Then no more fear? No more fear, Thompson confirmed. No more pain that matters. No more loss that lasts. My wife was in the deep levels, Edwards said, when they sealed it. She's here, Vasquez said, gesturing to one of the evolved. A woman stepped forward, her face familiar from the photos Edwards kept in his bunk. Different, but here. Edwards walked toward her and Curtis grabbed his arm. That's not your wife anymore. Maybe that's okay, he said, pulling free. The hour ticked by with agonizing slowness. Outside, the Nightborn assault intensified. Inside, the survivors argued, pleaded, chose. 7 decided to transform. They stood with Thompson, waiting. 15 minutes left. My ship was nearly ready. Hayes had been quietly organizing, selecting who would go. The youngest and the ones who could best testify about what happened here. Curtis refused to be on the list. "Captain goes down with the ship," she said. "This isn't a ship," Hayes argued. "Same principle." Thompson watched our preparations with those empty eyes. "You're making a mistake. Apex will hunt you forever, kill you all to keep this quiet." "Maybe," I said, "but we'll die human." Human. He said it like a foreign word. I remember caring about that. "Time's up." He walked to the main door. The other Evolved moved to every entrance, every sealed window, and began opening everything. "Run," Hayes commanded. We burst from the hub in a tight formation, 18 souls sprinting across 300 meters of hell. The Nightborn came from everywhere. The perimeter, the mine elevator, crawling up from drainage grates. Curtis fired as she ran, dropping bodies that would only rise again tomorrow. Reed clutched her sample container, the evidence of Apex's crime. 50 meters from the ship, Cox went down. A Nightborn took him at the knees, teeth tearing through tendons. Hayes didn't slow down, neither did I. 100 meters. William screamed as 3 Nightborn pulled her into the darkness. Someone else, I couldn't see who, vanished into a mass of bodies. The ship's ramp was down, engines hot. We threw ourselves inside, Curtis and Hayes physically shoving people through the hatch. I made it to the cockpit, hands moving over controls I'd operated 1,000 times in simulation, dozens in reality. "How many?" I asked. 13, Hayes called back. "We have 13. Curtis was still outside, rifle empty, using it as a club. A Nightborn clawed through her shoulder, spinning her around. She looked at me through the cockpit window and mouthed one word. "Go." I launched. The Stork tore itself from the landing pad with enough force to knock everyone in the cargo bay to the floor. Through the rear camera, I watched Curtis's last stand, watched the Nightborn swarm her position, watched the evolved Nightborn emerge from the hub to observe our escape with their empty eyes. We cleared atmosphere in 4 minutes, a dangerous ascent that rattled every rivet in the hull. But we were away, alive. 13 out of 28, plus me. Hayes stumbled into the cockpit, strapping into the co-pilot seat. "The extraction team will detect us." "They'll detect a ship leaving," I corrected, entering new coordinates. "But not where it's going. We're not going to the shipping lanes." I turned to him. "We're going to broadcast everything. Wideband emergency transmission. Every receiver in the sector will get Reed's data, the project files, all of it. Apex will have to explain why they turned a mining colony into a bioweapons lab, why they sent me to deliver poison, why they're sending a kill team to erase the evidence." I locked in the course. "We're not running, Hayes. We're going loud." Behind us, LV 734 shrank to a point of light. Somewhere down there, Thompson and his Evolved were welcoming their new members. The Nightborn were returning to their tunnels, and Curtis, if there was enough of her left, would rise at dawn, either as herself or as something else. "Peter," Reed said from behind me, "the sample, the original microbe, it's not just evidence." I turned to look at her. "It's still viable, still alive. If someone else gets it, if they modify it differently." She trailed off. Another Lazarus project, another colony of disposable test subjects, another Hayes managing the experiment, another me delivering the execution. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen," I said. 8 hours later, we began broadcasting. Every emergency frequency, every public channel, everything we had. Reed's analysis, the project videos, Hayes' 5 years of reports, and my own testimony. The truth about LV 734 spreading across the sector at the speed of light. Apex's response was predictable. We were terrorists. The broadcasts were fabrications. The colony had suffered a tragic industrial accident, nothing more. But other ships had received our transmission. Independent miners, freight haulers, even a military patrol. They started asking questions, demanding investigations. The story was out. We set course for Ganymede Station, neutral territory where Apex couldn't touch us without causing an interstellar incident. As I watched the stars wheel past, I thought about Thompson's offer. 47 deaths to transcend the fear of dying. Was that evolution or extinction? Were they still human in any way that mattered? Or had they become something else entirely? Weapons perfected through suffering. I thought about Edwards, choosing transformation to be with his wife again, even if neither of them were really the people they'd been. About the 15 billion people in the sector who were about to learn what Apex was willing to do to its own employees. My corporate ID badge sat on the console where I'd dropped it. Peter Gallo, logistics officer, employee number X, 77,429. I'd been so proud of that number, that identity. Now it was just a reminder of what I'd helped deliver. Death in biostasis containers, packed with all the proper documentation. Hayes was asleep in the co-pilot chair, finally free of managing his 5-year nightmare. The other survivors were quiet in the hold, processing their escape, their losses, the truth about what had been done to them. 8 hours to Ganymede Station, 8 hours to figure out how to live with what we'd learned, what we'd done, what we'd become. On LV 734, the sun was rising. The dead were returning to life, some as themselves, some as monsters, some as something beyond both. Thompson and his evolved were probably watching from the hub, waiting for humanity to understand what they already knew. That death was just another state of being, and fear was a choice they no longer had to make. I'd made my choice. I'd chosen to stay human, stay afraid, stay mortal. I'd chosen to remember that the numbers on my manifest were people, not assets. It wasn't much of a rebellion against a corporation that commanded fleets and controlled worlds. But it was mine. And for whatever time I had left, that would have to be enough.